Guys, there has been nothing short of an enormous political earthquake in Colorado. It could very well be that that state flips red. I know that's a big statement, but the people over at CNN are very worried about this. There was a runoff for a representative seat between conservative Scott Tipton and his even more conservative opponent, Lauren Boebek, and she defeated him pretty handily, even though he got endorsed by the president. She's even more closely aligned with the far right than he is. In Colorado, conservatives came out in force and flipped this seat to an even more conservative state. Something that the modern Republican Party is getting less and less comfortable with. This is a great thing. Make no mistake. Now, we're going to talk more about her in a bit. I had this video all set up because we have, of course, this coming Saturday, Independence Day. Well, there was another holiday, much like our Independence Day, that people don't like to talk about. And given the current context of what's happening in the world, I think it's very relevant, this quote. Those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. John F. Kennedy. When government abdicates its responsibility, pardon me one second. There we go. When government abdicates its responsibility to protect the people, it is incumbent upon the people to take whatever measures necessary to protect themselves and change the government by whatever means necessary. Now, this woman owns Shooter's Grill in Rifle, Colorado. Now, the reason the quote from Kennedy is important is because the last violent revolution that most people know about is Bastille Day in France, or more commonly known as the French Revolution. What many people don't know or understand are the events that led up to it and how frighteningly similar they are to our current situation. I've brought up a couple of slides, and tell me if you don't see some similarities. See, in the 1700s, early and mid, France was the cultural capital of Europe, home to numerous enlightened thinkers and had wealth. King Louis XIV was the most powerful king in Europe. After his death in 1715, Louis XV and XVI continued to rule France, but political and economic problems led to the French Revolution in 1789. What were those problems? We'll get to that in just a second. France was in debt because it had to borrow money to support the government, primarily from the American Revolution. Costly wars going back to Louis XIV. Does that sound familiar? Costly wars? Lavish lifestyles of the monarchs in Versailles. You mean like the people in our government as well? Increased taxes on the third estate. Now, this is what we would call our upper middle class. It gets better, though. Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette, did not control their personal spending and drove the country deep into debt. Louis tried to get the nobility to pay more taxes, but they refused. Food prices kept getting more expensive. Sound familiar? Banks refused to lend more money to the French government. And more importantly, the royal family flaunted their wealth and disregard for the difficulty of the lives of the common people. Raising taxes, flaunting wealth, high food prices, debt from unpaid for wars. And then there was the revolution. And then there was a war. England, Holland, Spain joined Austria and Prussia in the war against France. which gave rise to Napoleon Bonaparte. Doesn't the Bible say something like this? A great war and then another beast will rise? I brought this up so people can understand who the first, second, and third estate were. First estate, extremely wealthy. Second estate, nobility, lords and dukes. Third estate, France's middle and poor class. The bourgeoisie, France's middle class, mostly made up of business owners, craftsmen, and artisans. The sans-culottes, nicknames of the French poor class. And then, of course, the rise of Napoleon. This is what happened in France. This is after everything calmed down with the revolution here. There were problems in France because of the debt that was incurred from helping the colonies free themselves from Great Britain, which didn't last for very long. But that this happened in Colorado, in a blue state, guys, this could be something where they are going to absolutely, they were scratching their heads in 16. They're really going to be scratching their heads in 20 if this keeps up. Because they're already going in now to break up Chaz. And of course, the reason they're doing that is because the protests made it all the way to the mayor's house. See, she's the Marie Antoinette of Washington, not the woman on the left. The woman on the left is the woman who just defeated a Trump-endorsed candidate, Scott Tipton, because she was more conservative than he was. I brought up this picture because in a confrontation, this one basically sent Beto O'Rourke to his room without supper to think about what he had done. This is a much bigger deal than anyone is making of it. There are going to be people come out and vote. And they are going to vote because they hadn't voted before. Because they realize, hey, what if this would come to our state? What if the government would just magically decide that they don't want police anymore? Are we going to tolerate anyone who endorses that idea? Everyone has wives, sisters, mothers, daughters, that they want to have the ability to call 911 if they need it, and not have there be any hem-hawing about that. This is the face of that movement. This is why over at Patreon, I talk about this topic specifically. How this group BLM has absolutely no idea what they're doing. They truly don't. I now believe they are going to hand Mr. Trump a landslide win. There are going to be blue states that flip, Minnesota being another one of them. If they truly do defund the police there in Minneapolis, you can kiss the Vikings goodbye. That franchise will go to Memphis or some other appropriate city. My first choice would be Memphis. They've been begging for a pro franchise for a long time, and they have the wealth, they have the population center to support it. The NFL already knows the first team that signs Kaepernick is going to lose a huge chunk of their season ticket holders. People want to talk about creating financial pain. Oh, you ain't seen it yet. You have not seen it yet. This woman shouldn't have stood a chance. See, she wasn't coming from the middle. She wasn't coming from the left. She wasn't coming from a more moderate place. She was coming from a shoot first, ask questions later place. And she won. And she won big. This is a sign of things to come. much like what we are seeing in society. Those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. When the government abdicates its responsibility, it is incumbent upon the people to either replace the government or take up arms themselves. And this is everything that happened. What's going on in this country the last 10 years? That led to the French Revolution, that led to what we now know as Bastille Day. So I will leave it there. Like, share, subscribe.